So let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us. We are recording a session here for how makers have shifted to e-commerce sales as part of their sustainability around providing medical supplies to their communities in need. So we have a number of folks here that have all kind of started off, volunteering their time, volunteering their energy, volunteering to produce open source medical supplies for their communities, and then have slowly shifted to e-commerce as time has gone on and as the pandemic has continued. So I want to go ahead and take a moment, introduce everybody here, and then we'll get started with the conversation. So in the next, for like 2 to 3 minutes, please introduce yourselves, your background, what you make, and where and how you sell what you're making now. So let's go ahead and start with Connor.
Hey, so I'm Connor Weller. I'm a student at Washington State University studying mechanical engineering. I founded an organization called MakerForce, and we've been making 3D printed and other maker-made PPE. And over the course of that, I designed a silicone mask for use in hospitals. Ideally, the goal is to replace the N95 respirator and create an alternative. So I made this silicone mask. I don't think the camera shows it very well. And it's something that can be cast easily in a 3D printed mold. And the goal is to replace the 3D printed one and make something that's more sustainable and more usable for hospitals.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Johnny, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. My name is Johnny Flowers. My typical day-to-day role is as a mechanical engineer with Amazon Prime Air. I work on the aircraft electronics team. However, I've been invited to this panel because my team, Amazon Prime Air, in coordination with a local maker group, the Washington State 3D Face Shield Hub, we designed a new face shield called the PNWS that is now for sale at cost on Amazon.com. And all the design files have been released and open sourced as under the Apache 2 license and are available for download on GitHub.
Very cool. Thank you. Nick and Lane, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Nick Franklin. I designed the CMAS ear saver. I'm a mechanical engineer working in big tech. And go ahead, Lane.
Yes, Lane Klebin here. I am a mechanical engineer working mostly in consumer electronics. And I work with Nick to bring this to market. And current production has a sales listing on Amazon right now. And that's kind of the main avenue other than a more direct B2B sales through account management.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us. I would love to just kind of set the stage here and say, we've had tens of thousands of makers from all over the world who have stood up, basically improvised shops making PPE and making other medical supplies as best they can to support their communities. And, we've seen 16 million units of medical supplies go out across 55 different countries, just from the folks that we've tracked open source medical supplies. And, what we're seeing kind of globally is that a bunch of people are going through this process of essentially setting up a small business, right? You're looking for customers, you're looking for you're setting up sustainable patterns so you don't burn out, so that you have money for materials, right? Because this pandemic is going on. And you all have kind of made the leap and started e-commerce sales. And we wanted to just highlight your work and talk a little bit about, what y'all are doing so that maybe other people here can get similar ideas and, stand up their own platforms. So, I'd love to just go through and ask questions to all of you. So please, feel free to speak up. We're going to try and keep it short so we can get through a bunch of questions and then maybe have room for some conversation at the end from folks joining us from outside. So let's just get started. How did you start designing and making your supplies? When did you start? what did you start by doing? Nick and Lane, do y'all want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So I was stuck in my basement working from home, going a little crazy, and I actually felt a little guilty. I've got like 4 3D printers around me and a bunch of resources, and I wasn't doing anything to help. So honestly, that's really where it started for me. I didn't want to bite off more than I could chew, so I just decided to pick something and improve it. I noticed, in fact, I myself had started 3D printing the kind of gull wing design of ear savers. I was donating those to UMass Hospital here in Massachusetts. But I was seeing some feedback from the nurses there saying they were getting tangled in their hair, or they weren't quite long enough, or they wear them behind the neck, so it still hurts their ears on top. And I took all that feedback and decided I would redesign it in a way to address pretty much everything, all the issues that came up. And so I ended up with this 3D printed design here. It's modular, 2 of them can be connected together. And so I started sharing this out to the community. Again, the goal was to basically optimize for reduced material use, reduced print time, and squeeze as much functionality out of it as possible. The response to the design was overwhelmingly positive. So I decided I should start looking to making it mass produced.
Awesome. Lane, do you want to tack onto that about kind of where y'all went from there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe the first thing I'll say is that having 7,000 trial parts to prove a market and need is by far the most I've ever seen in any job I've worked or company I've operated myself. So it's a sure sign when Nick prints up 7,000 of these things and that folks want more. And at that point, Nick had worked through, as he mentioned, several design iterations. So at that point, it was about investigating how to get a bunch more of them made at one time instead of relying on a 1-by-1 3D print method, as well as logistics to be shipping and sending these everywhere. So when I mentioned having Amazon listing before, initially just putting it on Amazon just allowed taxes to be collected and all of the payments, all those types of logistics to be taken care of. So there is an interesting kind of business segue that would occur normally where you see products being sold directly on a website. That just takes tremendous amounts of effort and time. And so in a fast to market option like this one here, this opportunity presented, there was a lot of ways to, how would we say, cut corners without cutting the end quality to the consumer. It just was like cutting corners within the business in that regard. I mean, in terms of having a robust sales platform and that sort of thing. Might as well leverage what thousands of people have built there at Amazon.
And that's actually something else. Part of the reason that I reached out to Lane is him and I used to work together. Tons of respect for Lane. He's very talented, and I've seen him bring multiple products to market. And I just wasn't ready to go spin up an LLC and jump through all those hoops. And Lane's already got the supply chain, and he was just ready to go. So I could hand him the design, and he just ran with it.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you. Connor, do you want to go next? How did you start designing and making your supplies?
Yeah, sure. So it started out first as fully volunteer effort. I founded the Makerforce organization, and I wanted to try and help provide face shields and other PPE to some of the local healthcare workers that were requesting them from us. So we started by doing that. And through that process, some of the doctors at a local hospital reached out to us and asked to have us 3D print some of the 3D printed masks, like the Billings mask and so on. And after getting a few of those to them, they said they weren't really working for them. That wasn't really quite what they could use. So I kind of started working with them through the process of developing a mask that would work, but that can also be made by, anyone, because I don't want something that is, a completely locked down process. Like it's got to be silicone injection molded. It's, one person has that. The cost to get into that, it's like $20,000. So I'll try to develop something that can be made easily by anyone. So I started work with them on the silicone mask, and eventually got to a process where it's simple 3D printed molds, and then you use off the shelf silicone and you get a mask out of it, which is super fantastic. And all the plastic parts are 3D printed, which is really great. And the goal is that, you give one person one of these molds, and then suddenly that person anywhere in the world now has a little factory, and they can start making these masks and start selling these masks, kind of create production and help fulfill that demand. Kind of like what we're doing with PPE and distributed manufacturing through OSMS. So it was kind of the goal from the beginning. And then once I started getting a lot of, there was some press, a lot of media started covering it, and I got people asking for them. So I set up an online shop to start selling them. I used Squarespace to do that, just because I've been familiar with it before. It's not really the best if you're doing that. If you're starting to sell stuff like this, you don't really know what you're doing. I'd say start with Etsy or start selling on eBay. By far, those are super, super easy to get started with, and they help you with shipping as well. You don't have to worry about having extra shipping software, anything like that. They print labels, all that stuff. So yeah, that's how I got to what I'm doing now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Johnny, how did you start designing and making your supplies?
Yeah, sure. So in early March, a technical program manager at Amazon heard about a community group of 3D printing enthusiasts that was the Washington State 3D Face Shield Hub. And he started making face shields for donations, 3D printing existing designs for frontline workers. And this group was comprised of makers and professionals of various vocations. And they'd started to develop their own design, but they were lacking any real engineers. And they were printing all of these at their home offices. So seeing the need, this other Amazonian, Jason, brought myself and another colleague in from Primair's mechanical design and hardware teams to start improving the existing designs and get some solid engineering behind them.
Awesome. Very cool.
And, yeah, sorry. And we now are selling the design that we came up with online on Amazon.com at cost as well.
Very cool. And in like large cases too, like you don't buy one, you buy like a case of some amount.
Yeah, it comes in a case of 25, because that working with medical professionals, that was the quantity we deemed that was basically enough to cover a whole shift in a ward. So it would be able to cover every person in that ward as needed.
Very cool.
And Joe, yours the cost on that? Right?
Sorry?
Go ahead, Nick.
I just was asking what the cost is for the 25 pack.
Oh, they end up being $2.65 each. So it's $66.50, I think, is the total price for a pack of 25.
Nice.
Johnny, and those are reusable too, right? They're not.
Silly. Yeah. It's a multi-use face shield.
That's awesome. Very cool. So, I'm curious, what was the decision point where you all decided to start selling things online? For those of you who made that decision, because I know, Johnny, you started with that in mind at Amazon, presumably. Connor, do you want to talk about how you kind of came to the point of saying, you know what, I should be setting up something more formal?
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, it started because the R&D costs for designing the mask started getting expensive. Platinum cure silicone is not super cheap, and I've never worked with silicone before. It's my first time working with that as a material. So there was quite a bit of learning that was happening along with that, and a lot of molds. I've gone through so many kilograms of plastic just trying to make proper molds for this to work properly. So the cost of that started adding up. So I needed to find a way to start funding the project and not make it something where I'm digging myself in a hole. I'm only a college student, so I don't really have any savings. I don't have a job. It's my income is entirely from some small products I make. So I needed some way to kind of make back a little bit of that money and help continue development, because I'm pursuing the process of getting it FDA certified and allowing it to be something that can be used in the future for any circumstance, post COVID-19. It's expensive. So by selling it, it allows me to, one, have a little bit of extra money and help pay back that R&D cost, which expensive, especially for me. And then also allow further development and allow me to improve the mask and, you know, make it worth my time. It's tough when you're going for months at an end and, you know, there's nothing really coming out of it.
Absolutely. Nick and Lane, what prompted the switch over to selling supplies online?
Yeah, so I was single-handedly supplying UMass with these things, and I was unable to meet their demand. So I started looking into injection molding and other ways of getting these to them a little bit faster. We were considering doing like fundraising, so maybe fundraise and then we get these manufactured and then we provide the manufactured parts to the hospital. There's a couple other ideas on the table, but ultimately we realized if these are popular here, they're going to be popular everywhere, and it's worth just going for it, manufacturing a bunch and selling them.
Awesome. Johnny, I don't know if you want to tag on to that.
Yeah. Initially we started off with the maker group donating 3D printed designs as we iterated and got NIH approval, and then as it transferred to Amazon getting more involved, we're committed to leveraging our scale for good and putting our ability to innovate quickly into use to support communities around us. So selling these face shields at cost allowed us to reach a greater audience than we could on donations alone, and just kind of expand who we could make them available to.
Got it. Very cool. So I want to ask next, you know, how did there's a whole bunch of different places you can sell things online, including rolling your own. You know, how did you pick your online sales platform? Starting with Connor, you said you decided to roll your own. I don't know if you have regrets about it now or.
So I have another company that sells 3D printed cookie cutters that's based specifically around my college. So I kind of already had a fulfillment system set up for that. So setting up a Squarespace and doing all my own fulfillment wasn't super difficult for me. You can integrate with a software called Go Shippo, and you get discounts on shipping, and you can print them out with a thermal printer. Pretty simple, pretty cost effective if you've done it before. It takes a little bit of learning, but it's not super difficult. Although if I would have done it again, I would have probably gone to something more like a Shopify or something like that, just because they have a little bit better customization. It took me a while to get the shop to kind of match what I like. And then the website I've got everything hosted on for the files and documentation and how to do it, all that stuff. That was all hard coded by me in HTML, so it's a little bit different. But the shop had to be something different because I wanted it to be a little bit more customer friendly and, you know, have proper security for payments.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick and Lane?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Amazon was really the only platform that I had any experience with. So I was aware of Amazon's fulfillment services and planning to take advantage of that at some point. But right now, Lane is our fulfillment service.
And Lane, that was, I remember you were saying something about, you know, you had 3PL basically set up for your existing businesses, right? Third party logistics and warehousing.
Yes. Yeah. And I have kind of multiple layers of it, but the retail end of it is Amazon. So even with my other businesses, the parent company that developed this product, and the back end of that website is actually multi-channel fulfillment through Amazon. I've switched it on and off over the years with my previous companies. So in terms of, you know, e-commerce and 3PL type platforms, most of it came down to what I had time to and was willing to do myself versus pay somebody else to do. And you will. A lot of times I feel like I'm paying everybody but myself, and a lot of times that's the case. But then I just take joy in thinking that, you know, somebody else gets to enjoy a fancy dinner on me. No, so that definitely comes down to that Amazon being the main one that I have experience with. Yeah.
Got it.
And then for me,
Johnny,
like I work at Amazon, so it was a natural choice to kind of leverage our supply chain and logistics network. and then list on Amazon.com. It just kind of made sense. It was the lowest barrier to entry for us.
So, you all have these different portals where people can purchase these supplies. I'm curious, how do you think about, inventory demands? Like, are you making a ton and then selling them down and then deciding to make more? Are you manufacturing on demand for orders? Has that shifted over time? What are your thoughts there? Johnny, if you want to start once.
Yeah, so I'm actually not the best person to answer the question about how our inventory systems work, but I can work with our team and get back to you on an answer for that.
Sure. Yeah. Nick and Lane, I know you went from never having enough and printing, as quickly as you can. Do you now have a surplus? Do you have an inventory? Do you sell down from it? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so right now there is an inventory level in getting it produced to a cost that makes all the gears turn, so to speak. There is a minimum order quantity, and that's pretty typical too, doing mass manufacture, especially across seas. So we are sitting on some chunk of inventory. However, it's selling through. We would not ramp up more production unless we got a custom or a large order or a large opportunity to deliver a large amount. I changed my wording because that doesn't always mean sale. Right now with what we're doing, it could mean a large charity donation too, to get these to the places of most need. But that essentially what I'm getting to is that order function wise, we would not replenish that inventory until this was depleted or a custom order came in. Then of course we would ramp up basically a made to order situation there.
Yeah, and we pretty much just kicked this off within the last maybe 2 weeks that we really started sharing it out and getting the word out there. So still in that process.
Great. Okay. And Connor?
What was the question again? Sorry.
How do you think about managing inventory? Do you make everything just when an order comes through? Do you make up a bunch of supplies?
Yes. So I'm a little bit smaller scale than the rest of you guys. So I have inventory on hand. I tend to make about 10 masks of each color at a time when I do a run, just because that becomes more time efficient. Past that, it gets, because the process of mixing the silicone, coloring it, vacuuming it, all that kind of stuff, that takes some time, but it's about the same time no matter how big the batch is, which is kind of nice. So I tend to hold at least that much of each color silicone mask on hand. And then the actual plastic parts, I keep a pretty small inventory of those. I just kind of print as that inventory starts getting low. It's not super expensive and it's not super long to print, so it's pretty easy to keep up. Yeah, it's pretty small scale. If you're selling facial, something else like that, that's kind of what I'd recommend. That way you don't have a lot just sitting around.
Yeah, keeping a small batch ready to go to fulfill a shipment, and then,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. As it starts getting low, I trigger another manufacturing run, and I spend a couple of days getting that through. But yeah, besides that.
Awesome. And so next question is, are we talking about like you're making money back to just pay for materials? Are you talking about this is a sustainable amount of money that you're making for, the supplies? Like what are the types of margins you're looking at as you're kind of shifting to e-commerce? Like, are you keeping the system alive? Are you breaking even? Like, are you getting fancy dinners as a result of selling silicone masks? Connor, if you want to start.
Well, for me, it's can't remember what the exact margin. I got this calculated somewhere in a spreadsheet. But once you factor in the time it takes to make each mask, it's less than minimum wage per mask. But it's something where like I'm kind of in a good situation right now where I can, I'm still at home with my parents because I came home for the virus, and then yeah, right. I haven't gone back, so I'm in an okay place where like I don't need to have a huge income and be okay. So I'm making a little bit off that, but most of that money is kind of getting put to the side for R&D and developing version 5, which I hope is FDA approved and just can be used forever. That's the goal. So yeah.
Awesome. So you're kind of putting all of that money back into prototyping, looking for approvals, right? Not losing tons of money on supplies.
Exactly. Yeah. I've tried to make it where I don't think I've broke even yet based on R&D costs, but the next few weeks I should pass that, and then should be able to, have a profit, but it all kind of goes back into R&D. So.
Yeah. Very cool. And Nick and Lane?
Yeah. So, the margins are business level margins, but obviously only going for a couple weeks now. Our throughput and quantities aren't business level. So I would say that on a continuing basis, it would keep itself afloat and reasonable after kind of initial R&D costs and inventories zeroed out or paid off. So it's kind of a little bit of a time game, and how long will these be beneficial at what quantity? So, when working with a high volume, low margin item, well, right now we're just working with a low margin item because it's not high volume yet. So half of the equation is there right now.
Awesome. And, it sounds like the next step is building up awareness of your particular products and, getting the word out and pointing people to the site and things like that.
That's earloveppe.com, by the way.
Nice. Johnny, do you want to talk about kind of your thoughts on margins and Amazon's commitment, things like that?
Yeah, sure.
A lot of pretty clear.
Yeah, so our face shield is being sold at cost on Amazon.com, and so the price we're selling it for is the price we're buying all the parts and getting them assembled for. So we're making no money on this.
Yeah. And you said, what was that exactly? It was $265 was the... Yeah,
so for the multi-use face shields, they're $2.65 a piece, and they come in packs of 25, so it's $66.25 for 25 multi-use face shields shipped anywhere that Amazon delivers in the US.
Yep. Awesome. So, the big challenge that I know everyone is having right now, that we've seen from open source medical supplies perspective, is that the traditional avenues for marketing and sales and all that kind of stuff are not as functional, right? There are a lot of folks who have attempted to scam people on Facebook. There are a lot of folks who have made things that don't work, and so now we're seeing the ramifications of that being it's a lot harder for people making products like PPE to sell them. And I'd love to hear more about how y'all think about, particularly Nick, Lane, and Connor, how y'all think about marketing, how y'all have been approaching it, if you think that's been successful, and kind of what you're planning on next. So I don't know, Nick and Lane, if you want to start.
Yeah, so I think a lot of my process with this design is documented in OSMS. I really valued the feedback I was getting from the group, and it's just a great place to get ideas and work with others. So I've been taking advantage of that, just kind of keeping the story moving. And now we're move to mass production part, sharing that link, that's one way I'm trying to get it out there. When I was 3D printing these and sharing images and stuff online, there was a lot of people responding saying, where can I buy these? So I went through all my old comments and responded and said, we have them on Amazon now. So really just kind of doing the grassroots, ground up thing, reaching out to some of the people that I donated the 3D printed prototypes to. And so I've gotten a few of them to purchase these new ones. Friends and family members just sending out free samples. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll add to it a little bit to mention what's kind of happening in the advertising world on e-commerce right now. And that is that Google Ads has clamped down very heavily on anything that appears to be exploitative of the COVID crisis. So it falls under their new sensitive materials criteria. And it seems strange because I just get served up mask ads and PPE ads all the time. So I don't know what, somebody's doing something clever on the back end to sneak around these things. I have no intention of, and I don't have the resources and time to try everything under the Google sun to get Google AdWords to accept an ad. So I abandoned that after a couple tries and some research there. And I spoke with some marketing professionals I've worked with previously, and essentially that's what they're seeing as well. That extends even to online ads with Facebook and of course, Instagram being a Facebook product. And those types of ads, you can have them suggest a learn more button to get to your site. But if you opt for the ad to have a buy now action button, then they examine that more closely. And so even if you don't say mask or anything about PPE or any sort of claims, that if it's a buy now, somebody will glance at it and shut it down. I think that one's probably a little bit more ad hoc, because that seems to be less of a robot and more of a manual entry. But anyway, that's kind of the overview in terms of that. We do have Instagram promote ads running, but it would be learn more. Yeah, that directs people to the website.
And y'all have the additional issue of, you essentially have a new medical product, right? Like, ear savers were not a thing that existed before people had to wear elastic, loops on their N95s for 12 hours a day. Is kind of communication around what the product even is part of your marketing effort?
It is, and it does fall in line with everything that I've done before with my businesses. So my paint and stick wallpaper, temp paint. Most people don't know it exists, and as soon as they know it exists, they're like, "Oh, I want some," which is always great news. But it's like this effort of needing to only educate the consumer that it exists, and once they see that it exists, they seem to want it. That was the same thing with the filtration aftermarket filter system. As soon as people know about it, they want it. But this is the blue ocean area of invention. I'm excited about the invention because I know exactly what it is and what it's needed for. But there's a lot of, as you mentioned, awareness, education of the consumer.
And that would apply to reaching out to new people, maybe people who have this problem where their ears are being abraded by masks they wear, but they don't know that there's a solution out there. So far, for the most part, I've been working with medical community, and these are people who are very well aware of this problem. So it's a little less of a struggle getting them to buy in. But introducing it as a new product to a greater audience is a little more complicated.
Yeah. And Connor, how do you think about marketing, or is that even top of mind right now?
So it's definitely kind of top of mind because I need to fund the project somehow so I can keep, I want the goal is to get FDA approved, and I'm trying to get there. So I haven't done a whole lot of, classic marketing. I haven't done any Facebook ads, Instagram ads, Google AdWords, anything like that. Partially just because I don't have the funds for those ads to optimize properly. I don't have a whole lot of experience. So I'm worried I just kind of throw money into it like I've done in the past. So what I've been doing is I've been doing a little bit more of like organic guerrilla marketing, where I would share the design, mostly design. And one of the first things I've got on the website when you go and check out the files is a note that says that it's now available to purchase. So if people want to make it, they're welcome to. All the files are open source. They're all available. And I have great instruction videos on how to make the mask. But I've also made it pretty apparent that you can also buy it if you want to just, skip that process and get one. So I've been using that and posting it on different Facebook groups that are making PPE. So if anyone wants to make the mask, they can do that. I posted it on a few different subreddits, kind of showing that I've developed an open source mask, and that's been pretty good. But the best one so far is I had a local news station run a story on the mask I was developing, and they interviewed a few of the doctors I'm working with, interviewed me, and I actually met with the reporter and walked her through the whole process of casting a mask by herself.
Nice.
And that ended up doing really well, and I got a lot of sales from that one. All of these are free marketing. I didn't pay anything for any of them, but it's been steady, but not quite as much as I could otherwise.
Got it. So we have a couple of questions coming in. I want to kind of switch gears a little bit, take some questions from the community. If you're a panelist, please feel free to type some in. But we've had some come in from Facebook. Alicia asks, how did you go about shifting from donation-based to cost-based supply? Right. So how did you actually mechanically do that? Did you shift to a different e-commerce system than you started with, or a different fulfillment system than you started with? Has that evolved over time? And Alicia says, I'm using our own Wix-based setup, but want to move to a cost-based approach for longevity and expand into other products. So would love to hear about that.
I can speak a little bit to what we've been doing. So we haven't stopped our donations. We've now committed to Amazon donating a total of 200,000 face shields by the end of the year.
Nice.
While maintaining the listing at cost as well. So we're doing both in parallel, and I think that's important to do as well, because as many as you sell, there's still going to be plenty of people in vulnerable positions that need them and can't necessarily afford them.
Yeah. And how do you, I assume that the donation portal is different from the portal for regular sales?
Yeah, so our donation portal is actually going through the Washington State 3D Face Shield Hub, because we have a couple of doctors on staff there that are part of the group, and they will triage all the requests. So one example of a request that we got in is sometimes you get like a hospital asking for 5,000 shields because they used the disposable ones. Yeah. The most entertaining of that is we got a request from a morgue that had 5 staff for 2,500 shields.
Whoa.
And so as part of those donations, our doctors will reach out to those groups and to the requesters to actually verify the real need. And then once they verify the real need, they will then add them to a donation list that it then gets shipped out to them.
Very cool. Nick and Lane, you want to talk about how you went from donating 7,000 printed things to switching gears?
Fatigue.
What's that?
Fatigue.
Oh, I see.
Just, running the printers for 24/7 for a couple months on end was just kind of getting old. And as the design progressed to mass production, I was still printing actually. I just donated another 1,600 to the Framingham Makerspace just yesterday. So just kind of clearing out my inventory here. We're still donating in smaller quantities, like sample quantities, just to, again, try to get the product out there.
Yeah.
But I think at this point, my time is better spent trying to get these injection molded parts out and available to people.
And so people were just approaching you one-on-one saying, hey, could I get X amount to this address?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I posted on a local Framingham, Massachusetts Facebook page and a couple others. So, yeah.
And Connor, how did you manage the shift? Is it the same infrastructure? Is it different?
So it's kind of separate. So MakerForce is continuing to donate PPE, and we'll maintain doing that. And we've got a whole warehouse space for doing that. And because that takes a little bit more processing, because you have to receive the different parts from makers, process it, package it, and then ship it. So that process hasn't really changed. But the mask design I did kind of tangent to that, where I'm kind of using my own fulfillment system that I've used before in the past for other products. So it's not so much of a change, because I didn't start out with giving away the masks from the beginning or selling them from the beginning. But once I started selling them, I also started a portion of those have been getting donated to Makerforce as we get requests in for proper medical masks that are needed. Yeah.
Cool. So Sarah Miller asks, did any of you pull an insurance policy to cover yourselves, like for product liability, that kind of thing? And then are these medical devices, and are you required to have a label or directions for their intended uses?
I can answer on the second part of that question.
Okay.
So the face shields are classed as medical devices, but they are part of the 510K Class 1 exemption. So they fall under that. And in addition to that, they are the face shield design that we've been manufacturing has NIH approval as part of the COVID response. And it also has FDA EUA authorization as well.
Awesome.
But there are a whole load of requirements that come with that based on packaging, labeling, and like directions on it, like what you need to include on instructions and how you make the claims as well. So all of our descriptions and stuff are all in compliant with that. But that was challenging to navigate. And
so you submitted to the NIH portal and submitted to the FDA for emergency use authorization.
So the NIH, so we did it through the NIH portal for our designs. So our 3D printed and injection molded designs are both NIH approved.
Yeah.
And then that was first, and then FDA EUA authorization comes through based on manufacturing in an FDA authorized facility. So it's that the EUA is more to do with where and how it's manufactured than the design itself.
Got it.
Interesting.
So I guess I'll go.
Nick and Lane, do you want to talk about insurance policies? Or?
Yeah, so part of the reason that I chose the ear saver design, based on the time I had to work on something and the level of risk that I was willing to accept, I chose the ear saver because it is a pretty low risk thing. So there was no insurance policies or anything like that. I did also submit this design to the NIH, and it is still pending review. Not sure how long that normally takes. Johnny, maybe you. How long did it take you, Johnny?
Ours took about 2 weeks.
Okay. I'm going to have to send them another email. It's been a little more than 2 weeks. Yeah.
They probably got a whole load of design backlog that they're going through.
Yeah. When was yours approved? Because I wonder if they're still doing that. I think the heat's kind of simmered down a little bit on the need for those NIH approvals.
Yeah, ours went through, I think it was April time, like late April, early May. Mm-hmm. So it was still relatively early on.
Okay.
And Connor, do you want to talk about that?
So I guess mine is by far one of the most dangerous, if done wrong, medical devices. You know, if a face shield's kind of hard to mess up. Same thing with a ear saver, but with the mask doesn't work, you know, that's a pretty big deal. So I've been working closely with the medical team to try and get it as best as possible. But I really, in all the media so far, I haven't made any promises besides the testing that we've shown and that data we've shown. I've also followed all of the FDA guidelines on how you're supposed to list materials, how you're supposed to say what it is. Like you can't say it's a respirator, it's not a respirator. There's specific guidelines the FDA released on those. I think, Johnny, that's what you were mentioning. But they kind of opened up the board a little bit for makers to make PPE during this time. And they put kind of restrictions on what people need to say and how they need to describe the devices they're making during this time. And I'm sure that's going to be rolled back eventually. But for the time being, it shouldn't be super difficult if you're making a face shield or something like that. Just labeling it what it is and selling it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Danielle asks, how do you calculate costs for each piece of PPE? How did you go about calculating it? What you're selling it for? From Facebook. Connor, do you want to start?
So there's kind of two ways you can do that. You can either do the cost plus model, or you can do the value added, or the value added model, I guess, where it's you take whatever it costs you to make the product, you add in the cost of your time, whatever you value that at, and then you add, say, an extra 20% to add for overhead or whatever profit you want to make on top of that per product. Or you can look at what the product compares in the marketplace to other devices out there. You know, if you're making a sewn mask, what are other sewn masks selling at? How do you make that a cost-effective proposition? If it's something you can't compete with, then maybe you need to find a way to make it cheaper or find a different device. The silicone mask is kind of in a really weird niche category because it's not a standard mask that most people need to have, but it's meant to be a N95 replacement for those who don't have access to it, but it can be reused over and over and over and over. So it's a little bit more narrow market, so I can charge a little bit more for that. But even then the material cost is high. So it's a big part of kind of looking at what the other products like that around are being charged at, and how do you stay cost competitive with that? Because if you're seeing face shields like Johnny's being sold for $2 and you want to sell yours individually for 20 per, you know, that's might be a little bit difficult for you to get any sales. Or if you can only buy them in bulk, then maybe $10 per is competitive price. It's kind of looking at the market and seeing what cost is competitive and which cost isn't going to drive away your customers.
Mick and Lane, y'all want to talk about how you did costing for yours?
Yeah. So we followed the latter model, which is really to look around in the industry, and then looked at trying to undercut that by half. It's a saturated market.
We wanted to make it available to people who need it.
That really is it, yeah. And in a bulk quantity, we believe it is in our best interest and in the final consumer's best interest to be using this product over other mask extenders. Therefore, when looking at pricing of other mask extenders, we either try and go half price or essentially twice the quantity. Very lovely capitalist / socialist look on it, but that's essentially how we approach the pricing, is to make it widely available. So when people got these, they could easily hand one to someone else without feeling like, hey, you owe me $1 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, awesome. And then for us, we have a team that handles costing for items. But for this, the costing that was come up with just includes the cost of the mask itself. So it doesn't include any of the R&D that was put in to develop that to start with as well. Because by the time we got to the point of wanting to list it, a lot of that design work was done because it was originally mostly for donation. And it was something that we tried to get with it's also about picking the right materials. So picking materials that allow you to get into that price range as well. So just like for example, plastics, the frame on ours is made out of PETG and it's injection molded, but it allows us to get down to a lower cost than, say, if you used PEEK or Ultim, which are great materials for something like that, but you'd end up with a face shield that costs 10 times more just because of the polymer you used. And then in some cases, we chose to go with a more expensive material like polycarbonate for the shield instead of PET, just because it meant that our customers would get a better product. So it's doing those cost trade analyses to figure out where you can add value to your customer versus where you're just adding cost. And that was really important. And it also meant that we could get what we believed was the best face shield that we could design. And then the feedback we got from a lot of the medical professionals seem to agree with that. And we keep having more requests because they love them, basically.
And I assume that what goes into your price model for, at cost is like labor, when you divide out how many masks any one person's making, materials cost, machine runtime, machine wear and tear. This just for the audience that isn't familiar with that type of costing, do you have suggestions for what types of things they keep in mind?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a big thing is don't forget your labor cost, because sometimes people ignore that because they think it's free. And, don't discount yourself that much. If you're spending 100 hours making it, maybe it's not worth your time, or maybe you need to charge more for it. What was that, Nick?
Oh, I said it's a one-way ticket to burnout. It's really important that you pay yourself and take care of yourself. And I've fallen in that trap. I used to own my own business years ago, and I used to basically work for free just because I enjoyed it. And it was a great learning experience, but also a very fast way to burn out. So make sure you pay yourself.
And yeah, just to add to that, there's also cost by design as well. So the way that you design your parts, the tolerances you place on the design, like for an injection molded part, having logos and stuff on will massively add to the cost because the mold becomes far more complex. Stuff like that makes a huge difference. And even designing a part so it requires a lower pressure means you can have more cavities and you can exponentially decrease the cost of design. And there's entire books about reducing costs for injection molding and stuff like that. It's definitely an art form because the smallest tweaks, like adding a radius here can massively reduce your cost.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I like that you said it is an art form, because it is. Yeah. Optimizing the design, just changing one radius can take tons of money off of a part. It's kind of even like a Sudoku puzzle.
Yeah, and even to add to that, like you can have two different ABSs from two different brands. They perform exactly the same. One might be 10% more expensive, but then when you inject it, it will it'll flow faster, and so your tool time for each part will be maybe 50% of the other polymer. So you're paying more for your plastic, but then you pay less for your tool time. And like injection molding has so many different variables that are all running together at the same time. There's some very large companies that have some very good software to help you optimize that.
Very expensive software too.
Yeah.
And I guess Johnny, you've been through this. We have a question online. Is there like a guide to manufacturers for obtaining FDA, EUA, emergency use authorization?
There's various test labs that you can go out to help that will help you. But unfortunately, there's nothing really that's free. The closest thing to free guidance is the CFRs that I'm not sure what CFR stands for, but it's the various regulations that actually govern all of that. And because they're government documents, they're all available for free online. Just trying to read them requires a legal degree, basically. So there are independent test labs that's what they do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not the best answer, but
yeah. And just so that people are clear, the FDA's emergency use authorization is about not just the design, but also the actual fabrication of the design and who is fabricating it. Like you get an authorization for your factory, right? Like making a certain thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah.
In some ways, one of the easiest methods to use is to approach a manufacturing facility that already has those approvals in place. So just make it a requirement when you're looking for a factory. And then if the factory has those approvals already, it can make your life a lot easier in terms of getting those approvals because they will have all the facilities to manufacture in accordance with those guidelines, and they can give you advice as well.
Got it. Well, we are at time. I want to thank everybody here. Thank our participants for sending in great questions. Thanks to all of you panelists for taking an hour, 2 hours out of your day to share. I know a lot of people right now are trying to figure out how do they do this long term and how can they continue helping. And, this is definitely one viable option for a lot of folks. And so thank you for sharing all of your different levels of expertise, from making a couple 100,000 to, making, a couple dozen sustainably. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you for inviting us and bringing us all together. This is a fantastic opportunity. Plus, I'm absolutely going to use this for marketing. So
nice. Well, we have recorded this, and we will be posting it on our YouTube channel, and it'll be up on it'll be up on our Facebook group, so everybody can check it out. There we go. Yep. Thank you all very much, and thanks for everybody for joining us.